The train pulled into Reno, Nevada, with a screech of iron on iron that made Zelda Norton's teeth ache. And as she pressed her gloved hand to the cool glass of the window, she wondered if the man waiting for her would take one look at the premature gray streaking through her dark hair and send her right back to Chicago on the next train out. She was only 24 years old, but grief had painted silver through her temples and scattered it liberally through the rest of her hair like frost on October grass. Her mother had died slowly, painfully, over the course of 2 long years, and Zelda had nursed her through every terrible moment of it. By the time the end came, Zelda had looked in the mirror to find a woman who appeared a decade older than her years staring back. The conductor called out their arrival, and Zelda's hands trembled as she gathered her worn carpet bag and the small trunk that held everything she owned in this world. The letter from David Gallagher had been kind, even gentle in its phrasing. He was a rancher outside of Reno, 32 years old, never married, looking for a wife to share his life with. He had not asked for a photograph, which had seemed like a blessing at the time. Now, descending the train steps into the bright Nevada sun, Zelda wondered if that omission would prove to be a curse. The platform was crowded with people meeting the afternoon train. Miners heading into the hills, families reuniting, merchants collecting goods. Zelda stood uncertainly with her bag, scanning the faces for someone who might be looking for her. She had only his description to go by. Tall, broad-shouldered, dark hair, usually wore a brown hat. "Miss Norton." The voice came from her left, deep and hesitant. Zelda turned to find a man who matched the description exactly. David Gallagher stood a few feet away, his brown hat in his hands, his dark hair slightly mussed from where the hat had sat. He had strong features, weathered by sun and wind, and eyes the color of sage that widened slightly as he took in her appearance. This was it. The moment she had dreaded for the entire 3-day journey. Zelda lifted her chin, refusing to look away or make excuses. If he was going to reject her, better to get it over with quickly. David stepped closer, his gaze moving over her face with an intensity that made her want to look away. When his eyes lingered on her hair, Zelda felt her stomach drop. But then something shifted in his expression, softening it completely. "I was worried I might not recognize you," he said quietly. "But I do. You have kind eyes, just like your letters suggested." "The gray," Zelda said, forcing the words out. "I know I should have warned you. It happened when my mother was ill. I understand if this changes things." David's expression transformed, something warm and almost tender crossing his face. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and touched a silver strand near her temple with gentle fingers. "It matches the silver in my heart," he said softly. "I have my own scars, Miss Norton, though most of mine do not show so plainly. I think perhaps we might understand each other better than I had hoped." Zelda felt tears prick her eyes, but she blinked them back. She had cried enough in the past year to last a lifetime. "You are very kind, Mr. Gallagher." "David," he corrected. "And I hope you will call me that since we are to be married." He paused, uncertainty flickering across his face. "That is, if you are still willing." "I know I am not much to look at, and ranch life is hard. I have a foreman and 3 ranch hands, but it is still a lot of work. The house is sturdy but plain. I cannot offer you luxury." "I do not want luxury," Zelda said. "I want a home, a purpose, someone to build a life with." "Your letters suggested you wanted the same things." Relief flooded his features. "I do, more than I can say." He gestured toward her trunk. "Let me get your things. My wagon is just down the street. We can stop at the general store if you need anything before we head to the ranch, or we can go straight there. It is about an hour's ride from town." "Straight there, I think," Zelda said. She was tired from traveling and wanted to see what would be her new home. David collected her trunk easily, lifting it as though it weighed nothing, and offered his arm to escort her to the wagon. It was a practical vehicle, clean but clearly built for work rather than show. He loaded her trunk in the back and then helped her up to the seat, his hands strong and respectful as he steadied her. The ride out of town gave Zelda her first real look at Nevada. It was so different from Chicago, so open and endless. The sky stretched forever in every direction, a blue so intense it almost hurt to look at. Mountains rose in the distance, purple and mysterious. The sagebrush rolled on like a silvery ocean. "It is beautiful," she said softly. David glanced at her with surprise and pleasure. "Most people from back east think it is just empty desert, but I have always loved it. There is space here to breathe, to think, room to build something real." "Tell me about the ranch," Zelda said. "Your letters mentioned cattle, but not much else." As they rode, David talked, and Zelda was struck by how different he sounded from his letters. In writing, he had been careful and formal. Speaking, there was a warmth and enthusiasm that made her relax. He told her about his herd of beef cattle, the challenges of finding good grazing in the Nevada climate, the creek that ran through his property. He talked about his foreman, a man named Samuel who had been with him for 5 years, and the 3 other hands who helped run the operation. "Samuel's wife passed 3 years ago," David said quietly. "They never had children. He threw himself into work after, and I do not know what I would do without him. He is more friend than employee at this point." "And the others?" Zelda asked. "Young men, mostly." "Miguel came up from California 2 years ago, best hand with horses I have ever seen. The other 2, James and Thomas, are brothers from Missouri. Good workers, though they can be a bit wild when they go into town on Saturday nights." Zelda smiled slightly. It was a relief to know she would not be completely isolated, though she was also nervous about being the only woman in a household of men. David seemed to sense her thoughts. "The house has a good lock on the bedroom door," he said quietly. "And I want you to know that I will not expect anything from you until you are ready. We can take our time getting to know each other. I know some men see mail-order brides as property, but that is not how I view marriage. I want a partner, not a servant." The tightness in Zelda's chest eased a little more. "I appreciate that. This is all happening very quickly." "It is," David agreed, "but I have a good feeling about it. Your letters showed intelligence and heart. You have been through something difficult and came through it. That takes strength." They fell into a comfortable silence as the wagon rolled on. The sun was lowering toward the western mountains when David pointed ahead. "There, that is the ranch." Zelda could see buildings in the distance, clustered together like a small settlement. As they drew closer, she made out a main house, a large barn, a bunkhouse, and several smaller outbuildings. Everything was well maintained, the fences straight and strong, the buildings freshly painted. "It is bigger than I expected," Zelda admitted. "It has taken 10 years to build it up to this point," David said with obvious pride. "I started with nothing but a stake on the land and a dozen head of cattle. Now I have 300 head and more land than I ever dreamed of owning." As they pulled into the yard, several men emerged from the barn. They were dusty from work, but they doffed their hats respectfully as David helped Zelda down from the wagon. "Men, this is Miss Zelda Norton, who has come all the way from Chicago to marry me. We will have the ceremony in a few days once she has had time to settle in." David gestured to each man in turn. "This is Samuel, my foreman." Samuel was a man in his late 40s with graying hair and steady brown eyes. He nodded to Zelda with genuine warmth. "Welcome, Miss Norton. We are glad to have you here." "This is Miguel," David continued, indicating a younger man with dark hair and eyes and an easy smile. "Pleased to meet you, Senorita," Miguel said. "And this is James and Thomas," David finished, pointing to two young men who looked enough alike to clearly be brothers. They all welcomed her politely, and Zelda could see curiosity in their eyes but no hostility. That was something, at least. "I will show Miss Norton to the house," David said. "Samuel, can you see that her trunk is brought up?" "Of course," Samuel said, already moving toward the wagon. David led Zelda up the steps to a wide front porch. The door opened into a main room that served as both kitchen and living area. It was clean and orderly, but clearly the domain of men who had been living without a woman's touch. The furniture was heavy and practical, the decorations non-existent except for a landscape painting over the fireplace. "The bedroom is through here," David said, leading her through a doorway. "I moved all my things to the loft above the barn. You will have privacy here." The bedroom was simple but comfortable, with a large bed covered in a plain quilt, a wardrobe, a dresser with a mirror, and a washstand. A window looked out over the corral and the mountains beyond. "It is perfect," Zelda said, and meant it. The room was clean and peaceful, a sanctuary after the chaos of the past few years. "I will let you rest," David said. "I imagine you are tired from traveling. There is water in the pitcher, and I will have one of the men bring up a bath if you would like. Supper is usually at 6. We all eat together at the big table out there, but if you would prefer to eat in here tonight, I understand." Zelda considered. It would be easier to hide away, but that was not how she wanted to start this new life. "I will join you for supper. Thank you, David." He smiled, and it transformed his face from merely handsome to genuinely attractive. "You are welcome, Zelda. I am glad you are here." After he left, Zelda sank down on the bed and let out a long breath. The mattress was comfortable, the room quiet except for the distant sounds of the ranch. Through the window, she could see David talking with Samuel, both men gesturing as they discussed something. There was an ease between them that spoke of long friendship. A knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. Samuel stood there with her trunk balanced on his shoulder. "Where would you like this, Miss Norton?" "By the wardrobe, please," Zelda said, standing quickly. Samuel set it down carefully and then paused, looking like he wanted to say something. "David is a good man," he finally said. "He will treat you right. I know this is all strange and new, but you have nothing to fear here." "Thank you," Zelda said, touched by his concern. "That means more than you know." When he left, Zelda unpacked her few belongings. Her dresses were wrinkled from travel, and she shook them out before hanging them in the wardrobe. She had brought her mother's Bible, a cameo brooch that had belonged to her grandmother, and a few books. They looked pitifully small in the large dresser drawers. A copper tub was brought in by James and Thomas, followed by several buckets of hot water. The bath was heaven after days on the train. Zelda washed away the dust and grime, working lavender soap through her hair. The gray strands caught the light as she combed through them, still strange to her even after months of seeing them in the mirror. She dressed in her best dress, a simple gray cotton with white trim at the collar and cuffs. It was not fancy, but it was clean and pressed. Braiding her hair, she coiled it at the nape of her neck and secured it with pins. When she emerged from the bedroom, she found the table being set. David had changed into a clean shirt, and his hair was damp, suggesting he had washed up as well. The other men were similarly cleaned up, though their clothes showed the wear of ranch work. "You look refreshed," David said, pulling out a chair for her at the table. "The bath was wonderful, thank you," Zelda said, sitting down. Samuel brought a pot of stew to the table, along with fresh biscuits and butter. "David and I trade off on cooking," he explained. "But I will warn you, we are not fancy cooks. Good solid food, but nothing like you would get in a restaurant." The stew was indeed simple but delicious, full of beef and vegetables in a rich gravy. The biscuits were fluffy and warm. Zelda ate hungrily, realizing she had not had a proper meal since before boarding the train. The men talked easily about ranch business, discussing which cattle needed to be moved to fresh grazing, repairs that needed to be done on the barn roof, plans for expanding the herd. They included Zelda in the conversation naturally, explaining things when she looked confused, asking her opinion on small matters. "What kind of ranch did you grow up on, Miss Norton?" Miguel asked. "I did not grow up on a ranch at all," Zelda said. "My father was a clerk in Chicago. I have much to learn about ranch life." "We will teach you," David said firmly. "If you are interested in learning, that is. Some women prefer to keep to the house." "I would like to learn," Zelda said. "I have never been one to sit idle." After supper, the men returned to the bunkhouse while Samuel and David cleaned up the dishes. Zelda tried to help, but David waved her away. "You have had a long journey. Go rest. Tomorrow is soon enough to start taking on chores." Zelda did not argue. She was exhausted, the kind of bone-deep tiredness that came from stress and travel and emotion. She bid them all good night and retreated to the bedroom, locking the door as David had mentioned she could. The bed was as comfortable as it had looked, and Zelda fell asleep almost immediately, lulled by the unfamiliar sounds of the ranch settling in for the night. She woke to the sound of roosters and men's voices, early morning light streaming through the window. For a moment she was disoriented, forgetting where she was, and then it all came back. Nevada, the ranch, David, dressing quickly. Zelda emerged to find David making coffee at the stove. He looked up with a smile. "Good morning. Did you sleep well?" "Better than I have in months," Zelda admitted. "What can I do to help?" "Can you make biscuits?" David asked. "I am terrible at them, but the men complain if we do not have them with breakfast." "I can make biscuits," Zelda confirmed, rolling up her sleeves. They worked together in the kitchen, and Zelda was struck by how comfortable it felt. David moved around her easily, giving her space, showing her where things were kept. By the time the men came in from morning chores, the table was laden with eggs, bacon, biscuits, and gravy. "These biscuits are 100 times better than anything we have been eating," Thomas declared around a mouthful of food. "Do not talk with your mouth full," James said, kicking his brother under the table even as he reached for his third biscuit. The days settled into a rhythm. Zelda took over most of the cooking, which freed up Samuel and David for other work. She found she enjoyed it, experimenting with the ingredients available and trying to create variety in their meals. She also took on the laundry, the mending, and the cleaning of the house. But she also kept her word about learning ranch work. In the afternoons, when the housework was done, she would join David or Samuel or Miguel to learn various tasks. Miguel taught her about horses, showing her how to approach them, how to read their moods, how to saddle and bridle them. Samuel showed her how to recognize when cattle were sick or injured. David took her on rides around the property, showing her the boundaries of the ranch, the best grazing areas, the creek where they got their water. "You are a natural," David said one afternoon as they sat on their horses overlooking a small valley where cattle grazed peacefully. "Some people never develop a feel for the land, but you have it." "I love it here," Zelda said honestly. The openness that had seemed so strange at first now felt freeing. The work was hard but satisfying, and David himself was proving to be everything she could have hoped for. They talked constantly, sharing stories of their pasts, their hopes for the future. David had grown up in Pennsylvania, the youngest of 5 children. His father had been a blacksmith, his mother a seamstress. He had come west at 20, full of dreams and ambition, determined to build something of his own. I was tired of being the youngest, always following in someone else's footsteps, he explained. Out here, I could be my own man. Zelda told him about Chicago, about her quiet childhood as an only child. Her father had died when she was 16, leaving her and her mother in difficult financial circumstances. She had worked as a seamstress, then as a shop assistant, helping to make ends meet. When her mother fell ill, she had nursed her at home, using up their savings to pay for medicines that ultimately did little good. The doctor said it was her heart, Zelda said quietly. It just gave out slowly. Near the end, she made me promise I would not waste my life grieving for her. She wanted me to marry, to have a family, to be happy. Answering your advertisement felt like honoring that promise. David reached over and took her hand, his touch warm and solid. I am glad you did. Selfishly glad, because I cannot imagine anyone else sitting here with me now. The wedding took place on Saturday, just over a week after Zelda's arrival. They rode into Reno together, David in his best suit and Zelda in a dress she had made from fabric purchased at the general store. It was pale blue cotton with white lace at the collar, simple but pretty. The ceremony was performed by a circuit judge in his office, with Samuel and Miguel serving as witnesses. It was quick and official, nothing romantic about it. But when David slipped a simple gold band on Zelda's finger and the judge pronounced them married, something shifted in her chest. This was real now. She was truly starting a new life. They had dinner at Reno's best restaurant, which was still quite rustic by Chicago standards, but felt luxurious after a week of ranch food. Samuel and Miguel joined them, and they toasted to the happy couple with whiskey for the men and wine for Zelda. To David and Zelda, Samuel said, raising his glass, may your marriage be long and happy and full of children to carry on the ranch. The ride back to the ranch was quiet. Night had fallen, and the stars were so bright and numerous that Zelda gasped. I have never seen anything like that, she breathed. City lights block them out, David said, but out here you can see forever. When they reached the ranch, David helped Zelda down from the wagon with hands that trembled slightly. They stood in the yard for a moment, suddenly awkward with each other. I meant what I said before, David said quietly, about taking our time. Just because we are married now does not mean anything has to change tonight. Zelda looked up at him, this good man who had shown her such patience and kindness. In the past week, she had come to care for him deeply. The thought of being close to him did not frighten her. It felt right. I think perhaps it is time to stop waiting, she said softly. David's eyes widened. Are you certain? I am certain, Zelda said. We are married, David. I want this to be a real marriage. He cupped her face in his hands, his touch gentle, and kissed her for the first time. It was sweet and careful, asking rather than demanding. Zelda leaned into it, her hands coming up to rest on his chest where she could feel his heart beating fast. They went into the house together, to the bedroom that had been hers alone and was now theirs. David lit the lamp with shaking hands, and Zelda smiled at his nervousness. It eased her own. I have never done this before, she admitted. Neither have I, David said, looking relieved that she had spoken first. We will figure it out together. And they did, with tenderness and patience and moments of laughter when things were awkward. It was not the passionate encounter of romance novels, but something better, more real. Two people choosing each other, learning each other, beginning the journey of becoming one. Afterward, lying in David's arms, Zelda felt a peace she had not known in years. Thank you, she whispered. For what? David asked, his fingers tracing idle patterns on her shoulder. For seeing past the gray in my hair, for giving me a chance, for being kind. David tilted her face up so he could look into her eyes. The gray in your hair is beautiful because it is part of you. But even if you had arrived completely gray or completely bald, I would have felt the same. You have a good heart, Zelda. That is what matters. The months that followed were the happiest of Zelda's life. The ranch thrived under their joint care. Zelda proved to have a head for numbers, and she took over managing the accounts and correspondence. She also established a large garden, growing vegetables that added variety to their meals and could be preserved for winter. She made friends in town, other ranch wives who welcomed her into their circle. On Sundays, they attended church in Reno, and afterward would sometimes stay for social gatherings. Zelda found herself laughing again, singing again, looking forward to each new day. Her relationship with David deepened steadily. They talked about everything, argued occasionally about ranch decisions, made up thoroughly afterward. David was an affectionate man, quick to steal a kiss when they passed in the house, to take her hand during wagon rides, to pull her close at night. By Christmas, Zelda realized she was pregnant. She told David on Christmas morning, whispering it to him as they lay in bed watching the winter dawn light the mountains. David's face transformed with wonder and joy. "Truly, we are going to have a baby, truly," Zelda confirmed, laughing at his expression. He pulled her close, resting his hand on her still flat belly. "This is the best Christmas gift I could ever receive. A wife I love and a child on the way. I am the luckiest man alive." "You love me?" Zelda asked, her heart skipping a beat. They had not said those words to each other yet. "Of course I love you," David said, looking surprised. "I have loved you for months. I thought you knew." "I hoped," Zelda said, "but I was afraid to assume. David, I love you too, so very much." They spent Christmas morning in bed talking about the future, imagining their child, making plans. When they finally emerged, Samuel took one look at their faces and grinned. "I am guessing we will have a little one running around here come summer." "How did you know?" Zelda asked, blushing. "You both look like you swallowed sunshine," Samuel said. "I am happy for you. This ranch needs children." The men were all delighted by the news. Miguel immediately began carving a cradle in his spare time. James and Thomas argued cheerfully about whether the baby would be a boy or girl. Samuel quietly began making plans to hire more help for the summer so Zelda would not have to work so hard. The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Zelda felt well and continued most of her usual activities, though David fussed over her constantly. He would not let her lift anything heavy, insisted she rest every afternoon, and worried if she looked the slightest bit tired. "I am pregnant, not made of glass," Zelda protested one afternoon when he tried to prevent her from hanging laundry. "I know," David said, "but you are carrying our child. Let me take care of you." There was such tenderness in his voice that Zelda could not argue. She let herself be pampered, secretly enjoying his attentiveness. In March, tragedy struck the ranch. A late winter storm blew in, catching some of the cattle in the high pastures. The men rode out in the driving snow to bring them down, but conditions were treacherous. Miguel's horse slipped on ice, throwing him. The horse rolled, pinning Miguel's leg. It took hours to get him back to the ranch, and by then the leg was badly damaged. The doctor from Reno came out, examined Miguel, and shook his head. "The leg is crushed. If infection sets in, it could kill him. I recommend amputation." Miguel, conscious and in terrible pain, refused. "I am a horseman. What use is a horseman with one leg? Better to die." "You will not die," David said firmly, "and you will ride again. I do not care if it takes a year or 10 years, you will ride again." "Doctor, do what you can to save the leg." It was a terrible few weeks. Miguel developed a fever that had them all terrified. Zelda nursed him, changing bandages, spooning broth into him when he could barely swallow, sitting with him through the worst nights. David spelled her when she needed rest, as did Samuel. Slowly, miraculously, Miguel improved. The fever broke. The leg, though badly scarred and never quite straight again, did not have to be amputated. By the time Zelda was heavy with child, Miguel was walking with a cane and swearing he would be back on a horse by fall. "You saved my life," Miguel said to Zelda one afternoon as she checked his bandages. "We all did," Zelda said. "You are part of this family, Miguel. We take care of family." The baby came in early June, during a hot, dry spell that had everyone short-tempered. Zelda's labor started in the afternoon, and by evening she was working hard. David sent James racing to town for the doctor and the midwife, but the baby was impatient. Samuel, who had helped with many difficult calvings, ended up assisting with the birth along with Mrs. Carson, a neighbor who had arrived just in time. David paced the porch, refused entry to the bedroom, worried sick. When the baby's first cry split the air, David nearly broke down the door in his haste to get inside. Zelda lay exhausted but smiling, a bundle in her arms. "We have a son," she said softly. David approached as if in a dream, staring down at the tiny red face of his son. "He is perfect." "You are perfect. Thank you, Zelda." They named him Daniel Samuel Gallagher, Daniel for David's father and Samuel for the man who had become like family. Little Daniel was a lusty, healthy baby who demanded to be fed frequently and did not sleep much at night. The ranch hands were all besotted with him. Miguel carved him toys. James and Thomas took turns walking him when he was fussy. Samuel made a sling so Zelda could carry Daniel while doing light chores. "This place has come alive," Samuel observed one evening as they all sat on the porch, Daniel sleeping in his cradle while the men played cards and Zelda mended. "It was always a good ranch, but now it is a home." David reached over and squeezed Zelda's hand. "That is all because of you." "It is because of all of us," Zelda corrected. "We are a family, all of us." The years that followed brought both challenges and joys. The ranch continued to grow and prosper. Daniel was joined by a sister, Alina, 2 years later, and then another son, Robert, 2 years after that. The house had to be expanded to accommodate the growing family. Miguel did ride again, though he was never quite as fearless as he had been before his accident. He married a girl from town, a sweet young woman named Alina who moved to the ranch and became Zelda's closest friend. James and Thomas eventually left to start their own ranch further north, but they remained close friends and visited often. New hands were hired, some staying for years, others moving on after a season or two. David's hair began to show silver at his temples, and he teased Zelda that they were finally matching. Zelda's own gray had spread through her hair, but she no longer minded it. David loved to wind the silver strands around his fingers, telling her they were beautiful. On their 10th anniversary, David took Zelda on a trip to San Francisco, leaving the children in the capable hands of Samuel and Alina. It was the first time they had been truly alone together since Daniel's birth, and they rediscovered each other in the bustling city. "You ever regret it?" David asked one evening as they walked along the waterfront. Leaving Chicago, marrying a stranger, living on a ranch in the middle of Nevada. Zelda stopped and turned to face him. "Never. Not for one single moment. You gave me everything I did not even know I wanted. A home, a family, a purpose, and a love deeper than I imagined possible. That gray in my hair brought me to you, and I would not change it for anything." David pulled her close, kissing her in the fading light. "You said it matches the silver in my heart. Do you remember the day we met?" "I remember everything about that day," Zelda said. "I was trying to say that I understood loss, understood grief, understood carrying scars. But what I did not know yet was that you would heal that silver, transform it into something beautiful. You took a lonely rancher with a scarred heart and made him whole." They returned to the ranch refreshed and more in love than ever. The children were thrilled to have them home, and Daniel, now 8, gave them a full report of everything that had happened while they were gone. As the children grew, they each developed their own personalities. Daniel was serious and responsible, clearly destined to take over the ranch one day. Alina was spirited and wild, more comfortable on horseback than anywhere else. Robert was the dreamer, always drawing or writing stories. Zelda taught all of them to read and write, doing lessons at the kitchen table every morning. She taught Alina to sew and cook, though Alina was clearly more interested in ranch work. She taught the boys to be gentlemen, to treat women with respect, to value education and hard work. David taught them all to ride, to rope, to understand cattle and horses. He taught them the value of the land, the importance of conservation and good stewardship. He taught them that people were more important than profit, that loyalty and integrity mattered. Samuel, growing older but still sharp, taught them patience and the long view. Miguel taught them joy and resilience. Alina taught them kindness and the importance of community. When Daniel turned 18, David officially made him a partner in the ranch. "This place will be yours someday," he told his son. "I want you to have a say in running it now." Daniel took the responsibility seriously, working alongside his father every day, learning not just the physical work but the business side as well. He was courting a girl from town, the daughter of the general store owner, and David and Zelda approved heartily. Alina shocked everyone by announcing at 16 that she wanted to be a veterinarian. "I know it is unusual for a woman," she said, her chin set stubbornly. "But I am good with animals, better than good. And Dr. Henderson said he would sponsor my education if you agreed." David and Zelda talked late into the night about it. It was an unconventional path for a daughter, and they worried about how difficult it would be for her. But they had never believed in limiting their children. "If Alina wants to be a veterinarian, we will support her," David finally decided. "She has the brains and the dedication. It would be a shame to waste that." Alina left for veterinary school in the fall, promising to write often and return for visits. Zelda cried as they watched her go, but they were proud tears. Robert, at 14, had already announced his intention to be a writer. "Someone needs to tell the stories of the West," he said. "The real stories, not the made-up nonsense in those dime novels." "Then you will tell them," Zelda said, encouraging his writing. The ranch continued to thrive. They weathered droughts and harsh winters, cattle prices that fluctuated wildly, the gradual encroachment of civilization as more people moved west. Through it all, David and Zelda stood together, partners in every sense of the word. On their 20th anniversary, their children threw them a surprise party. The house was full of friends and neighbors, all come to celebrate. Daniel and his wife Margaret were there with their baby son, David and Zelda's first grandchild. Alina had made the journey back from school. Robert gave a speech that had everyone laughing and crying. Samuel, now in his 70s, stood up with his glass raised. 20 years ago, David took a chance on a mail-order bride. I remember the day she arrived, remember David coming back to the ranch and telling me about the gray in her hair. He was so taken with her already, though he tried to hide it. "I was terrible at hiding it," David interjected, laughing. "You were," Samuel agreed. "But the point is, we have all been blessed by that decision. Zelda brought life to this ranch, made it a home. She raised fine children, built a community, and loved my best friend the way he deserved to be loved." To David and Zelda. Everyone drank to that, and then there was music and dancing. David waltzed Zelda around the crowded room, both of them laughing like young people. 20 years, Zelda marveled. "It feels like yesterday and forever all at once." 20 years, and I love you more now than I did then," David said, "though I did not think that was possible." The gray in my hair is all white now, Zelda said, touching the white streak at her temple. It had spread until her dark hair was liberally mixed with white. Still matches the silver in my heart, David said, repeating the words he had spoken on the day they met. Though my heart is not scarred anymore, you healed it. As they danced, Zelda looked around the room at their life. Their children, grown and thriving. Their grandchild, the first of what she hoped would be many. Their friends who had become family. The ranch hands who were loyal and hardworking. This house, which had witnessed so much love and laughter and life. I was so afraid the day I arrived, Zelda said softly. Afraid you would send me away because of my hair, because I looked older than my years. I could not have imagined this. That gray hair was a gift, David said. It marked you as someone who had suffered but survived. Someone with strength and resilience. I saw that the moment I looked at you, and I knew you were exactly who I needed, who I wanted to spend my life with. The party went on late into the night. When everyone had finally gone home or retired to guest rooms, David and Zelda sat on the porch swing, watching the stars. What do you think the next 20 years will bring? Zelda asked. More grandchildren, I hope, David said. Watching our children build their own lives, growing old together. Still working this ranch, though maybe at a slower pace. That sounds perfect, Zelda said, resting her head on his shoulder. The years did indeed bring grandchildren. Daniel and Margaret had 3 more children. Alina, after finishing her studies, returned to Nevada and set up practice in Reno. She married a fellow veterinarian, and they had twin girls. Robert published his first book of Western stories and married his editor, a sharp-witted woman from New York who fell in love with both Robert and Nevada. David and Zelda became the center of a sprawling, loving family. Sunday dinners at the ranch required 3 tables to seat everyone. Holidays were chaotic and wonderful, full of children's laughter and the warmth of family. As they aged, David and Zelda gradually handed over more responsibility to Daniel, though they remained active in ranch life. David still rode out most mornings to check the cattle. Zelda still kept the accounts and tended her ever-expanding garden. Samuel passed away peacefully in his sleep at 78, and they buried him on the ranch he had loved. Miguel and Alina grew old alongside David and Zelda, their children intermarrying with the Gallagher children, binding the families even closer. On their 30th anniversary, too old for big parties but surrounded by immediate family, David and Zelda sat in their bedroom, which had been expanded and renovated multiple times over the years. 30 years, David said, echoing the wonder from a decade before. How did we get to be so old? By living every day fully, Zelda said. By loving each other and our family, by building something that will last beyond us. David took her hand, tracing the lines and age spots with gentle fingers. Your hands are still beautiful to me. You are still the most beautiful woman I have ever known. Even with my white hair and my wrinkles, Zelda teased. Especially with your white hair and your wrinkles, David said seriously. Every line tells a story of our life together. Every white hair is a memory. You are more beautiful to me now than the day you stepped off that train. And you are still the man who said my gray matched the silver in his heart, Zelda said softly. The man who saw past appearances to the woman underneath. The man who gave me a life beyond my wildest dreams. They sat in comfortable silence, hands entwined, watching the sunset paint the Nevada sky in shades of orange and pink and purple. In the yard below, their grandchildren were playing, their voices carrying on the evening air. We did good, David said quietly. With the ranch, with our children, with each other, we built something real and lasting. We did, Zelda agreed, and it all started with a letter and a leap of faith. Best leap I ever took, David said, Mine too, Zelda replied, leaning against him. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, the same stars that had witnessed their first kiss as husband and wife 30 years before, David and Zelda sat together in perfect contentment. The ranch was quiet now, settled in for the night. The cattle in the pastures, the horses in the barn, the family in their homes. "I love you, Zelda Gallagher," David said, as he had said thousands of times over the years. "I love you, David Gallagher," Zelda replied, as she had replied thousands of times before. But the words never grew stale or routine. Every time, they carried the full weight of their meaning, the full depth of their commitment to each other. The mail-order bride with gray in her hair and the lonely rancher with silver in his heart had found each other across thousands of miles and built a love that would echo through generations. Their children would tell the story to their children, and those children to theirs, of how Zelda Norton came to Nevada on faith and found David Gallagher waiting, of how he had looked at her gray hair and seen beauty instead of age, promise instead of loss. It became a family legend, the story of the gray hair and the silver heart, told and retold until it took on an almost mythic quality. But for David and Zelda, it was simply their truth. The truth of two people who had chosen each other and built a life on that choice, day by day, year by year, through joy and sorrow, triumph and challenge. As they aged into their 70s, they slowed down but never stopped. David still knew every inch of his ranch, every cow in his herd. Zelda still managed the household, though with help from her daughters and daughters-in-law now. They still shared the big bedroom with the view of the mountains, still reached for each other in the night, still talked about everything and nothing. On a warm spring morning in their 35th year of marriage, David woke to find Zelda watching him, a soft smile on her face. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, reaching up to touch her completely white hair, which she wore shorter now but still beautiful. "About how lucky we are," Zelda said, "to have found each other, to have had all these years. Some people live their whole lives and never know a love like ours." "I think about that too," David admitted. "I think about that day on the train platform, how nervous I was, how afraid you would take one look at me and run back to Chicago. And then there you were, with your gray hair and your kind eyes and your brave chin, and I knew. I just knew." "Knew what?" Zelda asked, though she had heard this story many times. "That you were mine," David said simply. "That we belonged to each other, that if I could just convince you to give me a chance, we would build something extraordinary together." "You did convince me," Zelda said, with one sentence. "It matches the silver in my heart," you said, "and I knew you understood. That you had been through loss too, that you had survived it, that you were strong enough to build a new life." They lay there as the sun rose higher, bathed in golden light, surrounded by the life they had built. Through the open window came the sounds of the ranch waking up. Daniel's voice calling to the hands, grandchildren laughing, horses whinnying for their breakfast. "Time to get up," David said eventually. "The day is waiting." "It can wait a few more minutes," Zelda said, holding him close. "I want to remember this moment. Just us together with everything we have built around us." So they stayed, wrapped in each other's arms, in no hurry to leave the sanctuary of their bedroom. There would be time enough for breakfast and chores and the business of the day. For now, there was just this. The two of them, still in love after all these years, still choosing each other every single day. When they finally did rise, they dressed together companionably, moving around each other with the ease of long practice. Zelda pinned up her white hair while David buttoned his shirt. They walked to the kitchen hand in hand, a habit they had never broken. The kitchen was already full. Daniel and Margaret had come for breakfast, bringing their youngest children. Eleanor had ridden out from town with her husband and daughters. Robert was there with his wife, having arrived late the night before for a visit. The table, extended to its full length with every leaf in place, was crowded and noisy and perfect. Zelda and the other women cooked together, laughing and talking. David and the men discussed ranch business and politics and the price of beef. The children ran in and out, bringing news of new calves and lost kittens and great adventures in the barn. This was what they had built. Not just a ranch, not just a business, but a family bound by love and loyalty and shared history. Every person at that table was there because David and Zelda had chosen each other 35 years before. After breakfast, as the younger generation dispersed to their various activities, David and Zelda walked out to the porch. The ranch spread before them, prosperous and thriving. The original house had been added onto multiple times and was now a sprawling structure. The barn had been rebuilt bigger and better. New outbuildings dotted the property. The herds had multiplied far beyond what they had started with. "Remember when it was just you, me, Samuel, and 3 ranch hands?" Zelda asked. "I remember," David said. "This was my dream, but you made it reality. You made this place a home that people wanted to be part of." "We did it together," Zelda corrected, as she always did. They stood there watching their world, at peace with their past and their present, secure in the knowledge that their future was assured through their children and grandchildren. That night, after everyone had gone home or to bed, David and Zelda sat on the porch swing one more time. It was a ritual they had maintained through decades, this quiet time together at the end of the day. "When I was young," Zelda said softly, "I thought my life was over when my hair turned gray. I thought no man would want me, that I had somehow used up my chance at happiness." "And instead," David prompted, "instead the gray brought me to you, led me to a life richer and fuller than I ever imagined, gave me a love story for the ages." She smiled. "I wish I could go back and tell that frightened girl on the train that everything was going to be more than all right." "She would not believe you," David said. "She would think it was too good to be true." "It does seem too good sometimes," Zelda admitted. 35 years of marriage, and I still love waking up next to you every morning. 35 years, and I still think you are the most remarkable woman I have ever known," David replied. He pulled her close, and they sat together as the stars came out as they had sat together thousands of times before. The ranch settled around them, peaceful in the spring night. Cattle lowing in the distance, horses moving in the corral, crickets singing their evening song. This was their kingdom, built on hard work and love and the faith they had in each other. As they finally rose to go inside, David held Zelda back for one more moment. "Do you know what I am most grateful for?" he asked. "Tell me," Zelda said, "that you got on that train. That you were brave enough to travel across the country to marry a stranger. That you did not let the gray in your hair stop you from taking a chance on life. Because if you had not, I would have spent my days alone, building a ranch but never making a home. You gave me everything, Zelda. Everything that matters." Zelda reached up and cupped his face, looking into eyes that had seen her through joy and sorrow, youth and age. "And you gave me the same. A reason to live fully again, a love that healed all my wounds, a family beyond my dreams. That gray hair was not a curse. It was a map that led me straight to you." They kissed in the starlight, two people who had found each other against all odds and built a love that would outlast them both. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new joys. There would be more grandchildren to spoil, more ranch business to manage, more meals to share with family, more sunsets to watch together. But tonight, they were simply David and Zelda, mail-order bride and lonely rancher, gray hair and silver heart, still as in love as the day they married, still grateful for every day they had together. Inside, they prepared for bed with the comfortable routine of long marriage. Zelda brushed out her white hair while David locked the doors and checked the stove. They changed into night clothes and climbed into bed, the same bed they had shared for 35 years. "Good night, my love," David whispered, pulling Zelda close. "Good night," Zelda replied, settling into his embrace with a contented sigh. As sleep claimed them, the ranch stood watch around them, testament to their partnership and their love. The land they had tended, the animals they had raised, the house they had filled with life, the family they had created together. All of it flowing from one moment of courage and one sentence of acceptance. "It matches the silver in my heart." Those words had changed everything, had taken two lonely people and made them whole, had created a legacy that would endure for generations, a love story that would be told and retold, inspiring others to take chances on happiness, to look past surface imperfections to the beauty beneath, to believe in the transformative power of love. The gray hair and the silver heart, forever joined, forever proving that the best love stories do not always begin with perfection, but with acceptance, understanding, and the courage to build something new from the ashes of the past.